2-minute introduction. I'm the new extension irrigation specialist for both Georgia and Alabama. So I'm based here out of Tifton. This is my contact information. 40% of my time will go to the state of Alabama right now. So I may be on the road a good bit and all, and sometimes difficult to catch me in the office, but that doesn't mean I'll be difficult to get in touch with. So just shoot me a call at the office or email. Pretty good answering email and all that. I've come here via Oklahoma, actually. I just finished a PhD there working in cotton harvest, and before that I'm from South Carolina. I did a lot of work in the coastal plains of South Carolina working in cotton, so similar situation to what y'all have here in the coastal plains of Georgia. I've got a good experience with all that. Some of the interesting work that I've worked on in the past and all, just general irrigation scheduling. I do have a very strong background in precision agriculture, so VRI, any precision ag work that you want to work on around, centered around irrigation, I can definitely handle that for sure. Soil moisture sensors, remote soil moisture detection, and irrigation strategies of just, looking at deficient irrigation, prime acclimation, anything of the such. So just wanted to do a quick introduction before I turn it over to Calvin. So there's my information now. I've met you. I look forward to working with everybody.
Since this session is about irrigation technology, water management, I'm going to give you kind of an update on what I see as the status of water resources around the state. If our thing will work, maybe not. So some of this you probably already know, but I'm just going to quickly go through it. We have abundant water resources in our state. We've got abundant surface water. We've got a lot of water basins throughout the state. We've got quite a bit of groundwater resources. I work down in primarily Mitchell County, southwest part of the state, the lower Flint Basin. Very abundant groundwater resources, but a lot of issues going on. Come on in. The state has been doing a good job to try to get a handle on water issues in our state, to do planning. Our EPD set up some water planning regions and water planning councils that you see here. They tried to match the basins as good as they could without having a lot of tiny little councils, and they did try to follow county boundaries, so you see how those work out. And each of those had a group of appointed council members that set a lot of policy, a lot of future-looking issues. They looked at how water would be used in the next 50 years. So they've done a lot of good work, and they were disbanded, I think, in 2012, but they've since been revived to, especially in the lower Flint, to look at some more recent issues that we'll talk about in just a minute. We have abundant groundwater in the coastal plain part of the state below the fall line. Primarily we irrigate from what we call the Floridan aquifer, which is in the blue. There's also access to some deeper aquifers, primarily the Clayton and the Claiborne are two of our aquifers that we can access in certain parts of the state. But as you'll see in a later map, there's pockets, even in the coastal plain, that groundwater is just not that easily tapped into. I will mention that most of the recharge is done in Dougherty County, Mitchell County, Miller County, Calhoun County. For the whole Floridan aquifer, most of the recharge occurs there, and then it flows eastward and southward. So it's a pretty important aquifer, and we have an important bit of recharge going on in our part of the world. And we get abundant rainfall on average down where we are, 50 to 52 inches. I think Stripling Park, where I'm based, actually gets 53 inches over the long-term average. That doesn't mean we get it every year. We definitely don't. And we don't get it when the crop needs it every year, hence the reason for so much irrigation in our state. If you look at just the growing season, April to September, we're somewhere in that 25, 26 inches. but that's been highly variable over the last several years, 2011 especially. And even more recently, like last year, when you look at when the rainfall occurred, I'm not sure if I have that slide, I think I took it out. You know, I'm not going to get up and preach about climate change and ask you your opinion, but we are seeing more extremes. We're seeing drier dries and wetter wets. We see rain events come in big slugs. So last year we had very ample rainfall, but it come really in about 4 big events. So we're not seeing that rainfall spread out through the season. So we irrigated quite a bit last year, even with, I think, George, we had 27 inches on our cotton. So the rainfall is definitely becoming more variable. We are a center pivot state, and we have some drip, we have some solid set, but primarily we're a center pivot state. We're not, you know, equal to someone like Nebraska, but we probably are pushing 15,000 center pivots now, so we've got a lot of units in our state. That's good, Sid, for people like you. You want to see even more, I know. Sid's a Valley representative. You can see how concentrated they are down in the lower part of the lower Flint. There's about 9 counties that have over half of those center pivots. So it's very densely situated with pivots down there, and it's because that's where the water is. You see primarily groundwater here, surface water, some ground and surface, over here some ground. So it varies by region, but that part where we're based is definitely groundwater, probably 3-to-1 groundwater versus surface water. Now each of the dots is not the wetted radius of the pivot, but just simply a dot where that center pivot is. And you can see it varies by region, certainly by availability of water, by Dougherty County, by land use, a lot of hunting plantations, and certainly a metro area there in Dougherty County. The Itchaway plantation there is not irrigated, so you can see some features going on. And of course, Lake Seminole down here. From back in 2005, there was some USGS data on water use and how it's distributed in Georgia. You can see that sort of matches where those center pivots were located in terms of acres. You've got some heavily irrigated counties down here in Decatur, Seminole, Mitchell, Baker. Baker County probably has as many pivots as it does people. It's heavily irrigated. And then you see in terms of water use, now that's in millions of gallons per day. Most ag folks think in terms of inches applied, so that's probably not the best way to put it, but that's how USGS calculated it. But you see where a tremendous amount of water is pumped in an average year. The circle is where our research facility is, and here you see the Flint River. We're about 3 miles from the river as the crow flies. We're surrounded by very large center pivots. It's a major resource for that part of the state. We've gone now from basically no center pivots to probably now pushing 15,000. We don't have a current survey to tell us how many are out there, but Sid, you guys have sold a lot of units in the last few years. So that number from probably 2008, 2009 is probably definitely higher than that now. I mentioned groundwater versus surface water. You can see here the red dots are our surface water sources for irrigation. And you can see in South Central there, much more surface water. Over here some surface, but intermingled with ground. But you can see down in the lower Flint, definitely more groundwater than surface water withdrawals there. And as of January 7th, when I grabbed this, this was good news. We are not in a drought anymore, thank goodness. If you went back just a couple of years, we had lots of regions that was in that darkest color throughout this part of the state, which meant extreme, or what's the term they use, exceptional drought. Thank goodness we're out of that. We have a little bit of overly dry areas over near the coast, but the rest of the state, nothing being reported. That's great news. That may change, but right now that's super. What I think I'll do now is very quickly I'm going to run through some graphs that I took off USGS, and you can go to this, just Google USGS Georgia. They've got a great website. We're going to start over around Waynesboro, come around the coastal plain and look at river flows, and then we'll look at some groundwater wells. And the river flows are going back 2 years. So you can see we were pretty low in a lot of these rivers, and you'll see a similar pattern. So Savannah River near Waynesboro, getting on the Ogeechee at Rocky Ford, and you can see how we've picked up with recent rains last summer and on into to this winter. The Altamaha, similar pattern. Satilla near Waycross, much more variable. I'm not that familiar with the Satilla, but similar pattern in 2013, but they must have had some rains in 2012.
It's a small river, so it's flashier.
Get more impact from each rain event. Similar on the Alapaha, near the town of Alapaha. Little River near Adel, just south of us. George, probably the same reason. Any rain event causes a spike. But you see the trend has been upward here last year and into this year. Getting close to my home, I live in Moultrie, so the Ochlockonee goes from Moultrie down to Thomasville, and highly variable there. It's a very small river. Now getting over to where I work at the Flint, this monitoring station is at the bridge at Newton. If you know where that is, you can see that definitely had some lows, but we've picked up quite nicely.
Those were historic lows in 2012.
Yep, very much serious levels. You could walk across the Flint. We have a young lady that works with us, her family farms right on the banks of the Flint, and they could literally walk across the river during the summer. So we've dramatically improved since then. Looking at some of the tributaries to the Flint, this is Itchway Notchaway at Milford. Notice that 7Q10. George, 7Q10 means that is a...
Put me on the spot now.
I know, I can't ever explain 7Q10. That's like a historic low. You don't want to go below that. We'll say it that way. And you can see we were well below that. And this directly feeds downstream into the Flint River. Spring Creek, we had some occasions in 2011 and probably many places in 2012 even. Spring Creek goes dry. And Spring Creek and some of these others, even the Flint, highly critical because U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are monitoring freshwater mussels in these waterways, and they're very concerned that in low flows or no flow conditions that we're losing endangered species. Key words right there. So we have to really be concentrating on situations in the lower Flint, because we've got not only the state of Florida suing us in the Supreme Court, we've got Fish and Wildlife Service looking at a serious condition here with our endangered species. Now you notice all these other streams, creeks, rivers were variable. They're free flowing, except for the Savannah maybe. But when you look at the Chattahoochee, it's managed by the Corps of Engineers, a series of from Lake Lanier all the way down to Lake Seminole, a managed set of reservoirs, and you can see the effect that has on flow. They keep that flow moving downstream, and they have to keep it at a certain point to keep the state of Florida happy. I believe it's 5,000 CFS that the states agreed in a compact that the Corps would supply to the state of Florida across the Woodruff Dam into the Apalachicola River. All right, let's look at some groundwater. First slide will be 2 years, and the second slide will be back as far as we could get data. So it's around 2007, 2008. So we start here with, in the short term, and over in Camden. I couldn't find any around Waynesboro. I'm not sure why USGS doesn't have one there. So this, Camden County is not that critical in ag, but we'll show it here. We've improved definitely in recent months. Coming on around Toombs County, last 2 years, and then since '08, very variable during that time span, but we're coming up. Crisp County, just north of here, last 2 years, And since '08, we're up. We're not as up as high as we were around 2010. We're definitely better than 2011. All right, Lowndes County, south of here, 2 years, and looking back to '08. Doherty County, just about 50 minutes west of here. Recent past, we definitely improved, but we're not where we were back in 2009, early 2010. But we're getting up, we're getting there. But notice where we dropped. Got pretty darn low. Lowest water level recorded prior to '99. We dipped below that. Going south, down near us, Mitchell County. This is near the fire tower, near the Flint River. We've rebounded. If you just look at that, you think great, but looking back more historically, well, we haven't recovered where we need to be. And in Decatur, similar patterns, Early County. And I'm going to stop there because I've used up most of my time, but we are in a water war with Florida because of this dam on the Chattahoochee River up at Lake Lanier. We've been sued now by Florida in the Supreme Court. First time they've actually sued us. They want a certain amount of water in the Apalachicola River. There's that 5,000. You see they had to maintain that even during drought conditions. Thankfully we're above that, but they've mentioned ag this time. Previously, Florida was suing the Corps of Engineers, talked about Atlanta water use, etc. They're still talking about that, but now they're including ag in the Flint Basin. How critical that is to water resources that they feel like they're entitled to a portion of. So it's going to be interesting to see how this is settled. And if you're from the lower Flint, you know there are some EPD suspensions going on down there. So we'll get out of this real quick. That's where we are located. If you're ever in the Camilla area, come by to see us. And last thing, if you get a farm and ranch irrigation survey from the USDA Ag Census, fill that out. Now, only people that indicated they irrigate back in the Census of Ag in 2012 will get one. But if you do, I'd encourage you to fill that out. We rely on that data for a lot of what we do. So with that, I'll take maybe a question, and then I'll get Dr. Velitis up here. He's got much more interesting data to show. But we're in good shape, I think, right now in water resources. We just hope we stay that way.